This is the Aftermarket Radio Network.
Welcome to another episode of Business by the Numbers. I'm your host, Demarest, CPA with Parmelis & Associates. So special thanks for this week's episode goes out to a client and listener, Mike, down at Bull Run 4x4 in Virginia. We're going to have Mike on here in the future. He was actually graceful enough to say, Hunt, you looking for a guest? And I always am. But he's got an awesome, as you might know in the name, 4x4 and off-road shop, specializes in Jeeps. So if you're in the Bull Run, Virginia area, check him out. And if you're in the area, you probably have already heard of him. But I want to have him on here. Most of you guys have probably dabbled in the aftermarket or performance world, and you probably change your mind because there's generally not a lot of money in there if you don't do it correctly. But Mike and his team have kind of figured it out and have a couple cool tips that I think could help other shop owners. So check that out in the coming weeks. However, this week, we're going to talk about the prospect of buying a current location or moving. So this is kind of what came on him. None of these numbers are going to be his. I changed all this stuff. But kind of talk about the situation that he's in is very similar to a lot of shop owners. Can you afford it? Should you afford it? Should you stay? Should you move? And everything else in between. Before we get into that, I just want to stop and say thank you to you and the rest of the dedicated listeners. Remember, if you want to hear your question answered on here, just have a question for me or an idea for a future episode, shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. And lastly, we cannot forget our dedicated sponsors, NapaTrax and Promotive, for being such loyal supporters of the show and the aftermarket as a whole. Hey, did you know that NapaTrax is on-site training plus 6 days a week support? It all starts when a local representative meets with you to learn about your business and how you run it. After all, it's your shop, so it's your choice. Let us prove to you that Trax is the single best shop management system in the business. Visit them online at napatrax.com. That's napatracs.com. Great news. You now have a hiring partner to help you with the heavy lifting of hiring your next superstar. Introducing Promotive, a full-service staffing solution for your auto repair shop. Visit them online at gopromotive.com. The tale is as old as time, or at least for me it is, so that's 36 years. But it goes something like this. You worked as a technician, maybe at a dealership, maybe an independent shop, and started doing some side work, maybe in your house garage. Once you got sick of your 9-to-5 or the side work became too much for your 9-to-5, that side work now became your 9-to-5. Once you grew out of your garage and you decided that you had to go find your own space, maybe you went and rented a shop. You hired some people, you built the business up, and now here you are faced with a possibility of buying that building and truly owning it outright. Would you own it outright? No, you'd probably have an investor, being the bank, but at that point you would own more or less everything that you do. Not that that is the only scenario, but I can already see a ton of you guys nodding your heads. And maybe you've already bought the building, or maybe you're a couple years out, but the general question and what I usually get is, Hunt, I want to buy my building. Can I afford it? What does the nut look like that I have to put down? Monthly expenses, etc. Some of these are easy questions. We'll talk about a little bit more in specific examples, but there's really one easy question on here. It's how much I had to put down. There are deals out there where you can put 0% financing, and they do it for real estate. I see it advertised or kind of teased a lot more than I actually see deals come across my plate. Does it happen? Absolutely. Is there ways that you can kind of leverage SBA or bank financing with owner financing to put zero money down? Absolutely. Is it common? No. So when I tell people at the most you would put down on a piece of real estate is like 20%. Generally 20% is for conventional deals. We see so many SBA deals that's probably what I would be estimating for most people. Most SBA deals, you got to put around 10% down. If you're thinking to yourself, Hunt, can I afford this? One of the biggest hurdles for a lot of people, just like residential real estate is, you can probably absorb the monthly expense. Arguably, it might be a negligible change. The big thing for a lot of my clients is that cash. You're going to buy $1 million building, you got to have $100,000 in cash, and $100,000 in cash that you're willing to part with. That is a big hurdle, but that is only part of the equation. Here is what you need to know to figure out the rest of that equation. So you've done that math in your head. All right, hon, I'm buying $1 million building, $2 million. I got the down payment. All right, I have a way to get that down payment. Can I actually afford this? What did the numbers look like? Here's where we get into the details. What do you need to know to do this for your own equation? You're going to need to know what your gross profit percentage is right now. Could you put a different gross profit percentage if you think by moving into this new place, by owning the building is going to increase it? Sure. But I would go with the lower number if there's two different ones. The reason why we're going to go with the lower gross profit percentage number is that is the more conservative approach on this. I always want to look at most any situation, I'm an accountant, with a little bit of worst case scenario. You don't want to look at this and say, hey, if everything goes exactly to plan or even better than plan, are we going to be able to afford this? No, I want to look at this and say, all right, I know I can't probably afford this if nothing changes or if these metrics go down. And maybe it'll go from 0 here to 10 over there. Am I going to factor everything on 10? Everything clicking on all cylinders, maximizing a new space? No, I'm probably going to do it somewhere in the middle. All right, what if we go over there and we don't light the world on fire, but we do better. We do a little bit better. We don't fully maximize what we can do in this new place for a couple of years. Go conservative on this stuff. If you're thinking, Hunt, my gross profit percentage right now is 56%, do this exercise at 50%. Two reasons. One, it's conservative, and 50% is really, really easy math. If you're at 48%, should you go down? No. This is all projections. This is all assumptions. So to some aspect of this, it's not an exact science. It's not meant to be. But what I want to look at is saying, all right, where am I? Where do I need to be? And what happens if I fall somewhere in the middle? You now know your gross profit percentage. You should know that anyways, but now you definitely know it. What you also need to know is you need to know what your current overhead is. All right, how much am I paying to occupy this place? Insurance, utilities costs, taxes, rent, etc., etc. What would be my overhead at my future place? If it's the same place, what are going to be your increased costs? Are you going to have to pay yourself or pay the mortgage at a higher rate? Is there going to be more insurance costs? Did your landlord pay for the taxes before? Now you're going to have to pay for it. You should know both of those numbers pretty well, but if you don't know those exact numbers, what we're really looking for is the difference between the two. So if you don't know if your current overhead is $40,000 or $60,000, and you don't know if your future is going to be $60,000 or $80,000, that is okay. If you know how much it's going to go up, that is all you need for this exercise. Think in your mind, all right, what am I going to gain for what I spend? Because that's what we're going to be using that number for. Let's go down through this and work this exercise as if you've already done this and you figured out that you're right at around 50% gross profit and the increased monthly overhead is going to be roughly $10,000. Whether it's rent, insurance, utilities, move, it doesn't really matter that much in this case. Well, I guess for this case, we're going to do moving to a new place, right? Or somewhere where it's going to give us increased capacity. The way that the situation looks like is this. Client calls me up and says, Hunt, looking to go to a new place on this. Right now, doing about $100,000 in sales a month, $1.2 million a year. And we are busting at the seams. Guys are tripping all over each other. Can't get another tech in here because there's no space. We are physically limited. We have cars. We have demand. We just don't have the space. We look at this. All right, what are we paying in current place? What is market rates? What it's going to look like to move here? Moving costs, advertising. There's so much more that goes into moving than just the overhead. But what we've realized is, all right, to go to this new place that's going to have more promises and higher capacity, a little bit larger square footage, it's going to cost us $10,000 extra a month in overhead. In this case, we're going to see it's going to cost us $10,000 a month more, but what are we going to do in sales? We go down through and say, all right, what do we think is going to happen here? We know that you guys are clicking at all cylinders right now and you're doing about $100,000 a month. With the square footage that you guys require right now, what could you guys do? So client comes back and says, easy 200. We have so much demand. We just physically don't have the people, the manpower, the space to handle it. So we're looking at that one. This is a little bit of an extreme example because you probably wouldn't need to listen to a podcast to see if this is a good deal. But you're going to say, all right, we're going to have $10,000 more in expenses, but we're going to have $100,000 more in sales. That's $90,000 in my pocket. A couple things on here. Like I said before, be realistic. And to a certain extent, you're going to be pessimistic here. This person thinks that he's going to go from $100,000 in sale to $200,000 overnight. It's never going to happen. Period. End of story. I almost guarantee it. 100% increase in a month, even a quarter, is something that few businesses have ever actually done. And those that have probably wouldn't wish it on someone else. There is such thing as growing too much too quickly here. But that's what they think that they can do if they're firing on all cylinders. So if I'm looking at this situation, I'm looking at this and saying, all right, if things are going perfectly, I need to take that into consideration. It's going to be $100,000 extra in sales. But remember, only about half of that we're going to actually turn into gross profit. So with that extra $100,000 in sales, $50,000 is going to go to our parts vendor. We're selling more parts. We're buying more parts. Some of that's going to go to our technician. If we had to hire another technician, obviously there's increased payroll cost, or even if we have the current one, are we doing a bonus, commission, flat rate, something like that? Even though we're spending $10,000, we're gaining $100,000 in sales, what we're really getting is an extra $50,000 in gross profit, and $10,000 of that gross profit is going to be eaten up by our increased overhead. Old space compared to new space, if we're really hitting the sales marks that we think we are, we're going to be $40,000 ahead in profit. No brainer. Since we are not going to go overnight here, I always want to kind of look and say, all right, what does this thing need to do pretty darn quickly to at least tread water? Because most people do not want to go to somewhere where, 5 years from now, we could be at $200,000. But if I'm going to be burning cash between now and then, am I ever actually going to make it? What we do is then kind of go from the opposite end of the spectrum. We were going from top line on that one. All right, old space, we can do 100,000. New space, what can we do in sales? And kind of working from the top down. If we want to kind of look at the break even or break similar on this, then what we would say is, all right, we have $10,000 in extra expenses. How much in gross profit do we need to cover that additional expense? If our gross profit percentage is 50%, then we know we need $20,000 in sales, which is going to turn into $10,000 in gross profit to pay that additional $10,000 in overhead expense. While my client might look at this and say, man, this is a no-brainer. If we do $200,000 in sales compared to $100,000 in sales, I'm going to be $40,000 ahead in profit. Boom, not too bad. And even when you look at this other side of this, you're going to say, all right, we need an extra $20,000 in sales. In a case like that, you could easily see how you could already be leaving that on the table just from inefficiency of your current team. And so this is a prime example where I look at this and say, obviously, tomorrow is not guaranteed, but looking at this, we need to do about 20% better in top line just to do the same. But look at the upside it's going to give us. Look at what we could do, but look at what we have to do just to do the same. It's not that far off from what we're currently doing right now. There's other ways to look at this. Where is that $20,000 going to come from? Is it going to come from cars? Sometimes if we're looking at something like that, we say, all right, well, how many more cars do we need if we need $20,000 in sales? So let's say your average repair order is $500. We take that $20,000 in sales, we divide it by 500, and we realize, all right, we're going to need about 40 more cars in a month. If you're thinking to yourself, I'm already telling people we're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks out, you could already have that demand right now. And this might mean no advertising. Now, if you don't have that demand and you're looking for work right now, it kind of gives you a goal of what you're going to need to step up in advertising. Same thing on the labor side of this. What does this look like in hours? What does this look like in production? So if I look at that $20,000 in additional sales and say, all right, half of that or about 10 grand is labor sales, how many hours am I going to need to sell to make an additional $10,000 in labor sales? If I do 10,000 and let's say that this shop is at $125 an hour, that means that I'm going to have to do around $80 or 80 hours more in a month to hit that same $20,000 in additional sales. So I need to do an extra 80 hours in a month to get that $20,000 in sales that I need to cover my increased overhead. And it works out to be around 20 hours a week. If you're looking at a shop that is already close to 100% productivity on there, you might say, all right, well, if we need 20 hours a week, then I'm going to have to hire a person because I don't have 20 hours of capacity in my current team. Looking at this not only kind of judges if this makes sense or how realistic it would be to absorb these additional costs, it also looks to see if you're hiring right or if you need to start putting out some ads. Do your techs have 20 hours capacity? Can your advisor handle 40 more cars in a month? Most of the time when moving into a new space or increasing your overhead, you probably are going to need to add people to increase your capacity or increase your productivity. Limited by the space, like we're talking about, kind of these closer ones, maybe not, but these numbers will tell you. Like I said, this is kind of a no-brainer one that I just ran through. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, Hunt, this is easy, but aren't these all going to be kind of a similar situation? In the past, Moving is always tricky. There's a lot of other aspects of moving your shop that come into play. I have to kind of preface it with that. I forget what someone said, but if you move more than a mile away, it's kind of crazy how much your return customers drop off. People are creatures of habit. They're going to continue to go to the same place, and if another shop is there, they might just have their car fixed there. But staying in your current location in the past has almost always been a no-brainer. It's only like in the last 5 years or so that we've been seeing more and more situations where it doesn't make sense to buy the existing place or even move and upgrade just because of real estate costs. It's really two aspects that in the recent time have really kind of changed things. And it's the skyrocketing real estate costs, and specifically in certain areas, and interest rates. NapaTrax has made selecting the right shop management system easy by offering the industry's best, most comprehensive SMS. It all starts when a local representative meets with you to learn about your business and how you need to run it. After all, it's your shop, so it's your choice, and having a local representation is a huge plus. Customizing tracks to your business, whether you're a one-person shop or a large multi-bay or multi-location company, our representative consults with you to help optimize your shop's workflow, efficiency, and profitability. And unlike the other guys, we'll be there for you after installation with the best training and support in the business, with a learning management system tailored to each role in your company. Simply put, Trax was designed and built for shop owners just like you. Visit us on the web at napatrax.com. That's napatracs.com. Are you tired of spending endless hours searching for the perfect talent to join your team? Promotive is your full-service automotive staffing solution. At Promotive, we believe in being more than just a recruiting agency. We become an extension of your team, working tirelessly to ensure we place the right talent with the right shops. With our always be recruiting mindset, we're constantly seeking out the best professionals in the industry. We manage 90 to 95% of the recruiting process, taking the burden off your shoulders. When you partner with Promotive, you gain a dedicated recruiter and account manager who will work closely with you, understanding your unique requirements and seeking out candidates who fit seamlessly into your shop's culture. We'll ensure that every candidate we present is thoroughly vetted and aligned with your needs. With Promotive, you'll have a peace of mind knowing that we're handling the recruitment process with expertise and precision. We don't just match resumes, we match character, culture, and long-term success. Visit our website at gopromotive.com today and experience the power of Promotive's expertise and dedication. Together, we'll build a stronger and more successful team. What we're seeing on the real estate cost, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, is there's a lot of places where I just don't see shops anymore. When I first started doing this, I had 2, maybe 3 shops in downtown San Francisco. We had a couple more as a company. We had clients in Palo Alto, a lot of places where you're like, oh, I don't think there's any shops here anymore. And that's true. There is a lot of places where we just don't have shops anymore. Zip codes, we used to have a presence that we don't. And there might not even be auto repairs in these places. All of my shops in San Francisco, when they sold their shops, people bought the business, the name, everything on it. Every single one of those, they bulldozed the shop and put up condos or something because it just became too valuable. The land itself was much more valuable to be used as a Starbucks, as condominiums, whatever it might be. That right there is a big aspect of this. You might be paying a rent that is fine and your landlord is 87 years old and he just doesn't know what the market is like. When he passes or she passes and the kids take over, the real estate agent's going to know what the market is like. And that's where sometimes people get these surprises. The other things on this is, just regular urban sprawl in a lot of places. 20, 30 years ago, when you rented that facility, maybe it was buried out in the middle of nowhere. But as property values and land and municipalities have been kind of expanding on this, you might now be in a very desirable place. And whether it's zoning, whether it's just property values, it's just very expensive to continue to operate a shop there. Lastly on this, the thing that has probably been a more recent impact is, hey, that building at 4% might not be that bad. That building at 8% is going to be double the monthly payment, if not more, and could be impossible. Just like we see with, residential mortgages, on the commercial side, yeah, some of these deals just no longer make sense at prevailing rates. We'll see what they do on the rates. These rates should be coming down in upcoming years, but I don't think that if things are going well, I don't think we should see any or forecast any major decreases anytime soon. If we do start seeing some rate decreases, is that going to change the market? Hey, we'll see. These are long-term rates, so there is already some of this expectation that rates will start to get cut at some point built in there. But yeah, this is hopefully about the worst we'll see on interest rates. It could be similar for a little bit of time, but hopefully the next step is kind of going down a little bit. What does that look like? I guess it wasn't this year. This was probably last fall. I had one of my clients call me up. I guess it was more than that. It was probably about 2 years because I remember thinking like, we don't see a ton of these. And then after that, started seeing a bunch more. Client sat down with landlord, 5-year lease was up. I think this guy actually just had a handshake deal and got freaked out, was like, hey, I really need to get something official. Let me get a actual lease done legality wise. So he went to his landlord and told him this. And he was like, man, why don't you just buy it from me? I don't care. I'm sick of doing this. I'm not looking to make a ton of money on this. I'll just have someone come out and appraise it and you can buy it for the appraised value. So client's like, cool. I'm just going to get this at market value. He's not going to try to put the screws to me. This is a really good opportunity. Kind of a crappy building, pretty crappy. It's older, but for the right price, he's already there. It's maybe not that bad of a deal. Currently, he was paying, or before this, I guess he still is paying this amount now, paying around $4,000 a month in rent. And when he went to run the numbers at the bank, his mortgage was going to be double that alone. He's not even paying triple net right now. So at $4,000, that's including taxes, insurance, everything on it. So like he was looking at around a $6,000 increase just by owning that. There is some aspect of, yeah, that's not all an expense. You're paying down debt. You have an underlying asset that should be appreciating on this, but he doesn't even really like this building. If he was buying one, it probably wouldn't be this. And so if we looked at this in the past, and this is 100% due to interest rates here, if we looked at this deal in 2018, he was probably paying $4,000 a month in rent then, and he probably could have got a mortgage on that for $3,000, $3,500. Right? It's a no-brainer. Okay, well, I'm paying the same amount of money, if not less, and I'm actually going to be paying myself and having an underlying asset. Now, flash forward today with interest rates as high as they were, and I think when he did this, it was like 9% or so, but he was looking at this of saying, all right, I'm going to have the same building, I'm going to have the same capacity, I'm going to have the same upside, but my downside is now much more because I'm doubling my rent cost, right? I'm doubling my facility cost for what benefit? This is one where still to this day, he's renting on it, and he's really kind of came to the conclusion of, you know what, I might not ever really own my real estate, and I'm okay with that. If you don't own your real estate, do you have to have assurances from your landlord that he'll be able to sell it? Yeah, you do. And especially for a case like this, with the landlord getting up in years, need to have the right of first refusal, or at least some options on here so that if your landlord does something, you still have time to act or react to it. Also, when selling the shop on it, as long as the landlord is willing to give amicable terms to a new buyer, I don't really see a whole lot of people saying, all right, I like that deal, but the person didn't own the real estate or vice versa. For many buyers, hey, if they can get the real estate, then great, but it's not a huge issue. One of the last things I want to talk about before we go into actually the whole reason of this episode is just that. Is someone else going to be able to operate your facility in the future? If my client, and let's just use this one, where it's $4,000 a month right now, but whether he buys it, someone else does, prevailing rate's probably going to be $8,000, if not more. And like I said, $8,000 for this place where it is just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What my client plans to do, and he doesn't plan to sell anytime soon, is he's probably going to ride this lease out, but he's going to at some point start setting some money aside and just baking in, hey, I'm going to move. Because if he sells his business right now to someone and they think that they're going to have to move it anytime soon, the value and the interest level just drops. Well, once it moves, it's still that same shop. They don't want to take on that risk. And so what my client plans to do is, whether it's this renewal or maybe 10 years down the road, move to a new location, whether he runs it for 6, 12, 18 months there, but get the business back up and in a sustainable location from a profit level, sales level, and real estate. And then at that point, he doesn't have the concerns, or prospective buyer wouldn't have the concerns of, well, what if I lose the real estate? Again, if he can buy that property and he's going to be playing landlord to someone else, that's what he's hoping for. But again, if he has somewhere where it's locked in as a rental and he's going to be able to get assurances for 10, 20 years, yeah, any buyer is going to be okay with that. Like I said, to the actual question or the situation that predicated this episode is kind of a similar story of what we're talking about here. Massive increases to overhead in a relative sense with maybe limited or non-existent capacity increases. What am I paying versus what am I getting? And so when we just looked at that, hey, we're paying double and we're getting the same. What do you do if you're faced in that situation? This is not anyone's numbers on this. I did this because the math works out, but this is kind of in a nutshell, a handful of deals that I've seen. Let's go, and I'm going to paint this story. I wrote all this stuff down, so let's just try it from the top. Current shop is paying around $3,000 a month in rent. Really, really cheap, $36,000 a year. It is a smaller shop, and they're limited by their capacity, so it's a 2-bay facility. The current landlord wants $4 million for the property, so it's out of the question. It's not worth it. It doesn't matter to you guys on this, but I just wanted to kind of explain to you, hey, the reason why this hypothetical shop is not staying is the landlord is just out of this world, right, on what he thinks it's worth. Also, why would we buy it? We know, just like we're talking about in the previous example, hey, we are limited by space. If we buy this, sure, we can do an addition, but at the end of the day, we're also just buying the space that we have right now, which we don't really want that much. Good news is real estate market is pretty active, so found a space up the road. About quarter mile, 3/4 of a mile down the road. The logistics works, customers will probably follow you there, all that good stuff. The guy wants $3 million for it, super good location, okay parking, only a 3-bay facility. Let's dive into this deal. If we're looking at this, I won't get into what the overhead was and will be, but the difference is $15,000. In order to go from the current 2-bay facility to this new 3-bay facility, it's going to cost them around $15,000 a month in overhead at least. Maybe more, honestly, than that, but let's just run it at $15,000. As we found out before, let's figure out what we need to do to make the same amount of money. So if we need $15,000 in additional gross profit, because that's what our additional overhead is, then we know we're going to need around $30,000 in additional sales in a month to cover that expense. Like we did before, taking a look at the amount of hours to produce or just kind of rough numbers about what technicians are producing. Like I said, his technicians are cranking out some work right now, and he's limited because he can only have 2 guys in there. And if he got a new space, he can add another one. However, his techs produce around $30,000 a month in sales right now. We stand to increase our capacity by 25%. So if we look at this and my client says, all right, I'm going to be able to move to this new space to add a technician. Why are you adding a technician? No one adds a technician to increase sales. Sales are just that. They're just a number. You do this to increase gross profit and to ultimately increase profit. But in this situation, if we look at this and say, all right, if we can get to this new place, we can get another guy in there. And if he does as good as what my team is doing right now, he's going to do an extra $30,000 in sales a month. 50% of that, or $15,000, is going to turn her into gross profit. But our overhead is $15,000 higher. So every cent of that gross profit dollar is going to go to our increased overhead. So what we have is we have a business that has more technicians, more sales, more customers with the exact same amount of profit. That is what you call a nightmare situation. That is working harder, not smarter. Yeah, we are increasing our sales. We're increasing our people. We're increasing our probability of running into issues. We stand to gain nothing out of this. That's if everything goes to plan. Just like we were talking about going from 100 to 200 before, that does not happen overnight. What if you have a down month, a down quarter, a recession, or your overhead is going to be $15,000 higher? What if your gross profit stays the same? Or God forbid, it starts to go down. Your downside is that much lower and your upside is really not higher at all in a relative sense. Sure, if you look at sales, your upside is now $30,000 a month higher. But like I said, we don't care about sales. We care about gross profit and ultimately profit. So if our upside is an additional $15,000 in gross profit, but we know that our overhead is going to be additional $15,000 in expense, then our upside is truly zero and our downside is massive. At least $15,000 extra a month, if not even more. To really close this option out here, like we mentioned before, we also have to factor in a down payment. And like I said, there are 0% loans out there, but we won't really see them that much. So if you're like this deal, my client's putting 10% down, they're all in. They would have to put together $300,000 in order to do this. So they're all in. They have no safety blanket. They have no savings account. And now they have an increased monthly nut that they need just to make the same amount of money. When you look at these deals, can you factor in, well, hey, if this goes right, I'm going to win. If this doesn't, I'm going to fail. Have it be a 50-50 shot? Yeah, if you like to gamble. So the more aggressive, the more you need on this, the more of a gamble that it is. But this is why you got into business. Self-employed is not for the weak of heart and takes money to make money, but you got to make sure that you're doing this in a calculated way, not emotional. If the upside is high enough on this, you'll be able to make that money back and you'll be able to increase your reserves or pay back that safety net that you had built up on this. But like I said, if you don't have that increase, if you don't see those hypotheticals working out, then that decrease in gross profit or similar in gross profit is met with a massive increase in your overhead. And you could see that small bit of cash that you have left over dwindle away very, very quickly. Does this mean that the dream of real estate ownership is dead to shop owners? No, not at all. And for most of the country, it's just like it's been for years. And it's a no-brainer and a really good opportunity for a lot of shops. But what I want you to get out of this is if you have the option to look at buying a shop, moving or whatever, that you look at the numbers on this. This is not something that should be done by emotional attachment and amount of years in the building. Because like I said, there's a lot of times where this is just not a technicality. This is not a no-brainer. Maybe it doesn't work for you now. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't work for you now, but when this lease comes due, it is going to work. You're never going to know until you run these numbers for yourself. As always, please share with friends. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for a future episode, shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. Just want to say thanks again for listening on the Aftermarket Radio Network. You can find all shows on aftermarketradionetwork.com and on your favorite podcast listening app. Thanks again for joining me on Business by the Numbers. Stay safe out there, and I will talk to you all next week.
You've been listening to Business by the Numbers with Hunt Demarest on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Hunt on your favorite podcast listening app. Let him know what you'd like him to cover. His email is in the show notes. Hunt is all for advancing the aftermarket.